That would be her call. We're trying to leave open the possibility of dialogue with all suspects in these killings. We'd welcome their direct communication, and for the sake of resolving this as quickly as possible, we've decided not to close any established channels, including the website.
Why the hell not? Why not close it down now?
An angry shout came from the back of the room. Heads and cameras swiveled around. I caught sight of a man, Alberto Ramirez. Oh, brother. It was his daughter Lydia who had been killed on the Parkway overpass. Chapter 56. The grieving father's voice was tight, but unwavering. What about what's best for my daughter Lydia? And for her poor mother, and her 3 sisters? Why do we have to be subjected to that kind of filth after everything else that's happened to our family? What's the matter with you people? No reporter jumped in with another question, not while the father had the floor. This was as good for them as it was bad for the MPD. Mr. Ramirez, Bree said. I was glad that she recognized the slain girl's father and used his name. We're all terribly sorry for your loss. I would like to meet with you about this matter immediately after the press conference. Some invisible barrier of restraint and protocol broke then, and a barrage of questions came firing at Bree from every direction. Is it the policy of the MPD to disregard community input? Asked some young wise guy from the Post. How do you plan to keep additional copycats from cropping up? Is Washington safe for anyone right now? And if not, why not? I thought that I knew what we ought to do next. I leaned in toward Bree with a slightly exaggerated finger to my watch. Time's up, I whispered by way of advice. Feeding time at the zoo is over. She nodded in agreement, then held up her hands to be heard. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the questions we can take right now. We'll work to keep you as informed as possible, as frequently as possible. Thank you for your patience. My daughter is dead! Alberto Ramirez was shouting from the rear. My little girl died on your watch! My Lydia is dead! It was a terrible indictment, and I knew it rang true, at least for the press. Most of them knew that we were looking for a needle in a haystack, how impossible this kind of manhunt was, but they wouldn't report it that way. They preferred their own bullshit act, sanctimonious and dumb. Chapter 57.
Kyle Craig was on the road again, and he was excited to be moving fast through time and space and fantasy. For a while during the car ride east, he let the sameness of the farms and fields rush past him and cool his overheated brain. Then, finally, he arrived in Iowa City, which was surrounded by rolling hills and woods, and which he knew to be a picturesque and much-loved college town. Just what he needed for the next step in his plan, or his recovery program, as he liked to call it. It took him another half-hour to find the main library building at the University of Iowa, which was situated east of the Iowa River on Madison Street. He had to show one of several IDs and then locate a computer that he could use for a while. A nice quiet reading room would be perfect for his needs. At this moment, Kyle knew 2 ways to get a message to DCAK. The more complicated involved the use of steganography, which would mean sending a message hidden in a picture or audio file. He didn't think he needed to go to that much trouble just yet. Nobody seemed to know about his relationship to the killer in D.C., or, as he knew, the killers. Instead, he chose a faster, low-tech method. He knew how and where to locate DCAK from Mason Wainwright, his former lawyer and loyal fan. He typed in www.myspace.com, then clicked on a name from Cool New People. Easy as that, actually. He typed a message to DCAK wanting to strike just the right tone. It's good to be free again. Free in the way that only you and I can understand. The possibilities are endless now, don't you think? I marvel at your art and your exquisitely complex mind. I have followed every event closely. That is, as closely as I could under the circumstances. Now that I'm out and around, I would like to meet with you in person. Leave me a message if this is as desirable to you as it is to me. I believe we could do even greater things together. What Kyle Craig kept to himself were his true feelings about DCAK. The word he wanted to type and send out to the killer was amateur. Or perhaps imitation, if you wanted to be kind.
Chapter 58.
No one who hadn't spent time in a super-maximum security prison could possibly understand his feelings now. That night in Iowa City, wearing another of his prosthetic masks, Kyle Craig roamed around, taking in the sights, savoring being there. He checked out the campus, which was situated on both sides of the river. The school was nicely integrated into the downtown area, and there were lots of quaint clothing, jewelry, and bookstores, and an incredible number of places to eat and drink. He happened on something interesting called the Iowa Avenue Literary Walk, which featured the words of writers with Iowa ties. Tennessee Williams, Kurt Vonnegut, even Flannery O'Connor, one of his favorites, because she was so wonderfully wrong in the head. Just past 9, he stopped into a bar called the Sanctuary. It looked like it might actually cater to some adults, not just college students, so he wouldn't stand out too much. There were oodles of wainscoting inside, and booths that looked like old church pews. And yes, indeed, an older crowd. "Yes, sir, what can I get you?" he heard the very instant he sat at the bar. The bartender looked as if he'd probably been a student at the university, and then had decided to stay in town, which seemed like a reasonable choice. White blonde hair cut short, with a contemporary flip in the front. Probably mid-20s, depressingly dull from the look of his eyes and his broad, welcoming smile. "How you doing, buddy?" said Craig. No more or less than a cordial greeting. He asked about the wines, then ordered a Brunello di Montalcino that seemed to tower in quality above the other reds served in the restaurant. "The Brunello is available only by the bottle. I don't know if I made that clear, sir." "It's not a problem. I'm not driving after I leave here," Kyle Craig said, and affected a pleasant chuckle. "I'll take the bottle. Uncork it and let it breathe for me, please. And I'd like the brie and apple appetizer. Could they please cut a fresh apple?" "I could help you with that Brunello, if you need help." A voice, female, came from Kyle's right. He turned and saw a woman seated a few stools away. She was by herself, smiling pleasantly at him. Police, he wondered? Then, no. Then, unless she's very good at what she does. "I'm Camille Pogue," she said, and smiled in a manner that struck him as both shy and slightly sly. Dark hair, petite, probably no more than 5 feet in her stockings. Mid to late 30s, he guessed. Obviously lonely, though she shouldn't be, given her looks, which interested him somewhat. He was drawn to people who had a little complexity to them, at least until he had them figured out. "I think I'd enjoy the company," Kyle said, and cast a smile back her way, nothing too aggressive. "I'm Alex Cross. Nice to meet you." "Hello, Alex." Kyle moved down the bar and sat beside Camille, and they talked rather easily for the next half hour or so. She turned out to be bright and only mildly neurotic on the face of things. She taught art history at the university, specializing in the Italian Renaissance. She had lived in Rome, Florence, and Venice, and now she was back in the United States, but not sure if she wanted to stay here, meaning in America, not just Iowa City. Because America isn't as you remembered it, or because it is exactly as you remembered it? Kyle asked. She laughed. I think it's a little of both, Alex. The political naivete and indifference in the States just drives me crazy sometimes. But what bothers me most is the conformity. It's a cancer, and it appears to be spreading, especially in the media. Everybody seems afraid to have an opinion of their own. Kyle nodded. You might accuse me of the latter for saying this, Camille, but I couldn't agree more. She leaned in close, but not in a way that could be off-putting or threatening. So, are you different, Alex? She asked. I'm different, I think. No, I'm sure that I am. In a good way, of course. Of course. They walked around the town square after they finished off the Brunello. Then she took him home to a pretty gray and white colonial on a side street off Clinton, with window boxes bursting with colorful flowers. The teacher had the entire ground floor, which was decorated with European furniture and art, and was quite spacious and open and welcoming. Another side of her revealed. A nice side, too. Homey? Homespun? Have you eaten, Alex? Other than your apple and cheese, your freshly cut apple, she said, swinging toward him a bit more forward inside her own place. She had soft breasts, but the rest of her seemed firm. Very nice and desirable. And suddenly Kyle knew exactly how he wanted her. Actually, he felt an incredible rush of lust. But first he yanked off his mask, and her eyes went wide with wonder and fear. "Oh, no," she said. Not wishing to waste any more time, Kyle thrust forward the ice pick that he had palmed in his right hand. The point passed through the front of Camille's throat and slid all the way out the back. Her blue eyes went to the size of silver dollars and seemed to roll back into her forehead. Then she was no more, submitting to his waiting arms. "That'll do it. Now let's make love, shall we?" Kyle said to the dead professor. "I told you I was different, didn't I?" Before he departed from Camille Pogue's apartment, he left another clue for whoever might come to collect the body. The clue was a small figurine representing a somewhat famous Midwestern statue called the Scout. It would be out of place in the art professor's apartment, but he doubted that anyone would get it. That was fine with Kyle. He got it. As Kevin Bacon had so eloquently said in the magnificent movie Diner, it was a smile.
Chapter 59. The next day held two very nasty surprises for me, as surprises so often are. The first was news that Kyle Craig had murdered his mother out in Colorado, and he had left a Hallmark greeting card, unsigned, for us to find. That meant either he was getting confidential information from a source inside the MPD, or somehow he was communicating with the killer, with DCAK. Was that possible? And if it was, what the hell was the relationship between the two of them? This wasn't the first time Kyle had communicated with other killers, I knew. There had been Casanova and the gentleman caller, possibly Mr. Smith. And now DCAK? Maybe even the lawyer in Colorado had been a killer. Or was he just a follower? A devotee? Late in the day, I received the second jolt, and it came from Brian Kitzmiller, who called and asked me to check out something on the internet. He directed me to the site in question. Great news! Somebody had set up a blog for me. I began to read and felt a little sick as I did.
You call yourself the Dragon Slayer? What's that about? Fantasy role-playing games? Are you a gamer, Cross? What excites you? Moves you? You've piqued my curiosity. After all, you are the one who caught the great Kyle Craig. Let's say I'm watching you and your family a great deal these days, and I notice you're spending a lot of alone time in little Ali's bedroom late at night.